welcome back to Love Your Food. This week we have a really excellent, rich recipe for you. This is your own homemade cream of mushroom soup. I guarantee you this one will beat the pants off of any Campbell's cream of mushroom soup you get out of a can. Really, really delicious, very rich, and we're going to start off by going over our ingredients. So we're going to start off with our green onions, some carrot, some celery, and some onion. We're going to be using chicken broth for this, as well as a little bit of cream, that's heavy cream, some flour, and some butter, so that's going to form our roux. We're going to use a bay leaf, some parsley, and many different kinds of mushrooms. We are using shimeji, crimini, oyster mushrooms, and king oyster mushrooms in this recipe. So we're going to start off with our mirepoix. This is the soup base, so we're going to start with the carrots and the celery and onion. Now this is a cream soup, and we want to get this nice and creamy and smooth. So what we're going to do once everything is cooked is we are actually going to be burr mixing this. So we're going to use our stick blender and get everything nice and smooth before we serve it. So what we want to do when we're getting our mirepoix ready is we want to make sure it's in pretty small pieces so that it cooks really thoroughly all the way through. So we're going to give this a very fine dice, very nice small little pieces so that it cooks quickly and cooks all the way through. So there's our carrot. We're going to do roughly the same for the celery, but we're just going to split it along the length of the ribs. And then again, just make very small pieces on that. Now the celery will cook a little faster than the carrots and will not take quite as long. And the onions as well, we are going to make nice small dice out of this. And of these three, the carrots will take the longest time to cook. Now, typical mirepoix, there is more onion than there is carrot and celery, as you can see here. So what we're going to do is melt our butter. Now we're using butter for this because what we're going to do is make a roux on the vegetables. So we're going to use this butter and start browning the vegetables, or at least start wilting the vegetables in it. And then once the vegetables have cooked all the way through, we're going to add the flour, and the flour and the butter are going to mix together to form a roux, which is going to be the thickening for our cream soup. So we're going to get that all in the pot. We're going to add just a little sprinkle of salt in there as well. That's going to let some of the juices come out of those veggies. And we're going to give this a good stir. So once the butter has completely melted, you want to make sure you give everything a good stir to make sure that all those veggies are covered in the butter. And then we're going to add the flour. This is once the butter has completely melted, we're going to add our flour in there. And then just give it a good stir to make sure it's well combined. We want to make sure that the butter and flour are mixed well together. Now's a great time to toss in the bay leaf as well. That's going to add some flavor overall. And then we're going to cover that and let that cook for a while. Now you do want to keep an eye on this because the flour and the butter together will start to stick a little bit to the bottom of your pan. You want to use a pretty steady medium-low heat for this so that it doesn't burn. And while that's cooking, it's time to get your mushrooms ready. So we're using a few different kinds of mushrooms, and they're all going to be in slightly different shapes. So the crimini mushrooms, we're just going to cut into these nice, sort of typical mushroom slices, shaped slices. And we're going to actually brown most of these mushrooms. We're going to give them a little cook before we put them in the soup for a little bit of extra flavor. For the oyster mushrooms, for those really small little pieces, we can just cut them in half once. You want to give them one flat side so you can get a little browning on those. The bigger ones, don't be afraid to cut those into more than two pieces. We can slice those up. But we're going to leave those pretty much big chunks of mushroom. Now they're going to shrink down a lot as we cook them. The king oyster mushrooms we are going to cook very small. These are very dense delicious mushrooms, but they, if they're in really big pieces, they're actually very chewy. So we're going to cut these into quite small little cubes. And we're mostly going to use these for the texture, and we're going to brown these like the other mushrooms. Now the shimeji mushrooms, these are a very interesting little mushroom, and we just love the shape of them. First thing you want to do with these, or any mushroom that you get that is served in their growing medium, is you want to get rid of that growing medium, because it's mostly grain hulls and sometimes bits of chips of wood and stuff, so just get rid of that. Make sure it's not in your soup, unless you like mud in your soup. Now we are going to take the tops of these, and we're going to set these aside. We're not going to cook these in advance. We're going to add these to the soup raw just before serving until they're cooked all the way through, because we just love those little mushroom shapes. So here you see we are just going to give that a stir. You can see that roux really cooking down to the bottom of the pot, and as I said, you do want to keep an eye on that and keep stirring it so that it doesn't stick and that the roux doesn't get sort of crunchy on the bottom there. You don't want a whole lot of color yet, or actually at all. You don't want to get a whole lot of color in this soup. We just want everything to be cooked through without doing a lot of searing or a lot of caramelization. You can see the roux forming on the vegetables there. It's really, really nice. Everything's getting quite thick in there. It's not quite cooked all the way through yet. You want to make sure that your carrots are nice and soft. This is your opportunity to get them cooked all the way through. Now for our mushrooms, we're going to add a little bit more butter, actually a lot more butter, and those are going to hit that nice hot pan. Now they look like they're a little crowded now, so we've got all three of our mushrooms plus the stems from the shimeji mushrooms. We just kept the tops for the soup. Now that's going to cook down quite a lot, so we're going to add a little bit of black pepper, a little bit of salt in there. And we're just going to let these cook for some time. We want to get a good brown, we're going to get a good sear on those, so we're going to let these cook for quite some time until they get a lot of color and they've cooked down quite a lot, and then we're going to add them to the soup once they've already cooked. So here we go. You can see a lot more liquid has come out of those veggies. We're going to take the bay leaf out. And you can see it's a little more liquid now. Those carrots are cooked all the way through. They're good and soft. They're not crunchy at all anymore. So now is a great time to get going with the soup part. So we're going to add our chicken stock. And this is the part where we're going to let the flour finish cooking in the soup. So we're going to give this a stir. This is to avoid getting any big clumps of that roux, which is mostly cooked now. And also to let us get anything stuck to the bottom of the pot off as well. So you can see this has come up to a very serious simmer. That foam on top shows you that the flour is just about finished cooking. Out of the corner of your eye, you can probably see some of those nice brown mushrooms in the other pan. So once we have that nice and cooked all the way through, we're going to add our heavy cream. And then we're going to get out our stick blender. So this is when we're going to liquefy everything in there. So we're going to give this a good blend. If you have a food processor or a blender, you can use that as well. If you want this to be perfectly smooth, this isn't really the way to do it. You would have to put it through a strainer and get rid of all those little tiny bits of carrot and onion and everything. We're fine with those little bits. That's not really, we're not going for the perfect silky smooth soup here. We're just going for that really delicious rich cream mushroom soup. So the cream and the roux have mixed together. You can see here our beautiful mushrooms. They've got a lot of color. As I said, they've shrunk down a lot. They've cooked down quite some, and those are going to go right into our soup. And there's a little bit of funnel left at the bottom of our pan, so we're just going to deglaze that. Traditionally with mushrooms, we're going to use a little bit of cognac, but I mean, you can use whatever you like for this. You can use a little bit of the chicken stock as well. Now, cognac did add a really fantastic flavor to our soup, but if you don't have that on hand or it's not something you want to cook with, I mean, that's entirely up to you. So once everything's all come up to temperature, the mushrooms are all in the soup. It's a great time to taste it. We're going to spice this up with a little bit of herbs. So we had a mix of thyme and a little bit of rosemary, a little bit of oregano as well, and a couple dashes of Tabasco sauce just for a little bit of acid in there. Really perks up anything that's creamy. And that herb mix, you can do whatever you prefer with mushrooms. Sometimes we use tarragon and whatever we have on hand that we're really interested in that day. And now we're going to add those nice shimeji mushrooms on top. And you can see they have that great, super cute little baby mushroom shape. And we're just going to let those finish cooking in the soup. They look fantastic. Really great flavor as well. So while everything finishes coming up to temperature, we're going to get our garnish ready. So we're just going to take a little bit of this parsley. We're going to slice that really nice and fine. And the same with this green onion. So we're just going to give this a good little slice on a bias so you have those very pretty little rings of green onions. And that nice sharpness from the green onion is a great complement to that very rich and unctuous soup. You can see the roux has done its job. It's really thickened quite a lot. The cream is all fully integrated. The mushrooms are all cooked and hot all the way through. So now it's time to hit bowls. So we're just going to put that in the bowl, and then on top we're going to add a nice little raft of our green onions on top, and a little sprinkle of that parsley. And that's it. That's the whole thing. Absolutely delicious, really, really fantastic, and very rich recipe for homemade cream mushroom soup. Fantastic side dish, really warming on a cold day. As we're getting into spring, we're hoping that we'll be a little bit warmer, but I mean, the weather's been a little nuts lately, so if you need that warmth, this is a great recipe to do it with. If you like this recipe, please do like and subscribe. And if you have any recipes you'd like to see Chef Caleb try on the channel, please let us know in the comments below. And remember to love your food.